Caribe Radio, nos proponemos ser la emisora online calificada para ser la mejor opción en comunicación para usted. Nos preparamos en noticias, deportes, cultura, música y de entretenimiento general para que usted esté conectado todo el tiempo con nosotros. Caribe Radio ofrece el mejor servicio de comunicación digital para que las empresas se hagan visibles a diferentes públicos. Desde lo público trabajamos para el servicio y por el servicio social. Caribe Radio Online nos entrenamos día a día para brindar la mejor opción en producción de medios digitales. Caribe Radio, la radio del futuro.
Los conceptos, productos y servicios del siguiente espacio son responsabilidad del director del programa y no representan el pensamiento de esta emisora.
Good afternoon. This is Discussions with Authors, part of Books Over Drinks, an online community meant to foster the passion for books by providing a platform for both authors and readers to exchange ideas and discuss their work. We are pleased to welcome Amy Webb to discuss her book, The Genesis Machine, Our Quest to Rewrite Life in the Age of Synthetic Biology. Amy is one of the world's leading foresight practitioners and the founder of the Future Today Institute, a foresight and strategy firm that helps leaders and organizations prepare for complex futures. She's also a professor of strategic foresight at New York University's Stern School of Business. Through her work, she has pioneered a data-driven foresight methodology used by hundreds of organizations and has been referred to by Forbes as one of the 5 women changing the world. In The Genesis Machine, she talks about the evolving field of synthetic biology, the fusion of biology and computers, and how it can reshape our world in many fundamental ways. Not only has synthetic biology the potential to help address crucial global challenges, it can also make us question some of the fundamental aspects of human life. Welcome, Amy. We are delighted to have you here.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. I appreciate your inviting me.
Awesome. So why don't we start right away by discussing what is synthetic biology? Could you describe it in your own words so that our non-technical audience can understand it?
Absolutely. And I should also point out, I am not a technical person. So I'm a social scientist. My job is to collect data, develop models, and think about next order impacts, but I'm not a biologist. So here's my understanding. I wrote the book with a microbiologist, but sort of here's the best way to think about it from a non-technical point of view. It's been a number of years since we identified the structures of life, so DNA. So for quite a while now, we've had read access, if you think about this in terms of computers. CRISPR, which a lot of people have heard about, this is kind of like a pair of molecular scissors that give scientists the ability to snip out and replace, so copy and paste letters in DNA. Now, that's relatively new. And some scientists won the Nobel Prize. So this work is established, it's out of the lab now, and we see real world use cases. So that's like edit access, if we think of computers. Synthetic biology gives us write access, which means the ability to take existing structures, living organisms, and enhance them to have new capabilities, or even developing entirely new organisms from scratch using the basic building blocks of life. And write access to life is pretty profound. I mean, it gives us so much optionality when we think about, I'm looking at my window, growing things. I have a pretty big garden. It means making our crops more adaptable to climate change. It actually gives us new tools to deal with climate change, but it also does stuff like, for women and men and non-binary people who wear nail polish, it's really annoying when your nails chip. And, part of what this means is we could have a future with self-healing nail polish, where if you get a scratch on your car, self-healing paint on your car, stuff like that. So this is really a field of science that's relatively new. It's hybrid, so it combines these different areas, but there literally is not an area of business or even everyday life that this will not touch in some way going forward. Another way to think about it is it's kind of like AI. AI is here. Most of the AI that exists is invisible to us. It just makes our lives better. We don't even acknowledge that it's AI. And it's changed everything. I think 10 years from now, we will probably look back and say, we'll have the same conversations about AI that we're actually having about synthetic biology, which is everybody will have an opinion about it. It'll be pervasive, and there will be wonderful things that have happened and probably some mistakes that have been made.
Very interesting. It definitely sounds like it will have a major impact in many different aspects of our human lives and the world in general. And I can't help but wonder, how will all that happen when we think of it in terms of intellectual property? I know in your book you discuss a bit about patents and how this all will roll out. Could you maybe expand on that?
Yeah, it's actually an area that I'm pretty concerned about. So, just like every other area of science and tech, this area also includes protections, legal protections for those who are making discoveries or tools. This has actually been a problem in other fields of tech, like artificial intelligence. Once you get patents on things, the reason that you want a patent is because it gives you the ability to license your technology out to others, and that's where there's a lot of money to be made. In fact, the company that produced BlackBerries, as everybody knows, has had some financial troubles. And just a few months ago, had to sell off its patents, which was the last valuable asset that the company had, because they're not making, traditional BlackBerries like they were. So these patents are pretty valuable. When it comes to biology, there are some questions around, these are biological processes. So CRISPR, for example, game-changing, literally life-altering technology. However, there was a debate about who should have access, who should get the IP. And in the United States, there were two groups, one at a public university, so this is Berkeley, and one at a privately funded university. It's actually a joint partnership between Harvard and MIT. They both, everybody builds on everybody else's research. They both sent in their patent applications for CRISPR around the same time. However, the private university, so this is Harvard and MIT, paid for, you could pay to have your paperwork prioritized to jump the line.
Like a fast track it.
Like a fast track, totally, like fast track. So they paid a bunch of extra money to fast track. The public university didn't. And originally, the patents for CRISPR were awarded to Jennifer Doudna, who won the Nobel, who's at the public university. And very recently, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office reversed its decision and gave it to the other university because technically theirs arrived first. I mean, it's crazy to me that we're allowing these, the Patent and Trademark Office to make some of these decisions when we're talking about literally like life-altering research. And I think that's only going to continue. There's another example that we give in the book about rice. And there were some researchers that were trying to solve a nutritional issue, just not totally solve it, but at least gain some forward momentum on it. They came up with a new strain of rice that would have packed in many, many more nutrients. It was still organic. It's still very good for you. But it turns out they used they would have infringed on 70 different patents. And to resolve that issue, they wound up working with some outside companies that said, we'll make the patent issues go away, but we want to be able to market this product. And ultimately, that product became known as golden rice. And for those of you who might remember some of that coverage in the 90s and 2000s, it became this like marketing catastrophe. All because, again, we've got these complicated IP issues that we're going to have to work out. There's no easy solution, but the longer that we wait, the worse this is going to get.
Yeah, definitely sounds like a challenging topic that needs to be addressed to avoid some risks in the future. I also can't help but think, for example, now that you mentioned rice, many countries in the global south are looking constantly for different ways, like not only to secure their food supplies, but to also address different challenges, for example, climate change, inequality, well, the list goes on and on. How do you think, or how are you seeing that trends are evolving when it comes to the global south and participation in synthetic biology? Because from what you say, it sounds like very sophisticated, very technology-driven area that will require lots of investment, lots of specialized knowledge. What future is there for the global south in this whole synthetic biology scenario?
That's a great question. I think it's a question in two parts. So the second part was the level of sophistication, the investment. It seems like something hard to break into. I'll address that first, and then I'll talk about the huge opportunities that I see for the global south. So to answer that first question, what's kind of cool about this field is that there are a lot of people who have basic understanding of biology, but a lot of understanding of engineering, who are able to break into this field, or people who maybe understand data science, not so much on the biology, but again, able to break into the field. What's really interesting is that this is a very, I sort of specialize in two fields, AI and synthetic biology, at least in terms of my research. The AI community is kind of closed off. There's not like this sort of DIY, communal, let's come together and figure some stuff out. That is not the case when it comes to synthetic biology. There are all these different community groups, startups. There's actually a group at the MIT Media Lab that is all about community biology and synthetic biology in particular. To me, it feels a little bit more inclusive and welcoming, even though the topic itself may seem very challenging. But and my co-author, Andrew, is deeply, deeply embedded in all of these community programs. There's one in particular called iGEMS that we write about in the book that's designed to get kids, young kids, interested and involved in engineering biology. So I think if you're somebody that is at all interested, there's plenty of ways for you to start tinkering. I can tell you, I don't know what everybody's going to think about me when I tell you this, but for my daughter's at summer camp right now. When she returns, I got her this really cool art kit that lets you grow E. coli in different colors, and you can like paint with E. coli and make like cool looking arts and crafts projects. And the kit for that is in my refrigerator next to the rest of our food. Right. I know. It's everybody's like, you wrote a book on this, lady, and you've got E. coli. It's like, it's sealed and it's in a separate part of the refrigerator. This is like the worst breaking every rule kind of thing to do. But my point is, she's an interesting kid. This was kind of a cheap kid, and like, let's see where this takes her. So it's easier to do that, for example, than to like have her sit down with GPT-3 and have her give an open AI system a prompt. And, that's not as exciting. Now to the second question, or the first question about the global South. So I do a lot of work in Brazil and in parts of Latin America. And, Brazil in particular is a country that I think has enormous potential, but has suffered from a lack of long-term planning at the government level. That's true of a lot of different countries, including the United States. But in Brazil in particular, this is an agricultural, the economy is very heavily dependent on agriculture. Now, what do we know to be true? we've got extreme weather events that don't seem to be stopping. As you and I are talking right now, the state of Texas is rationing electricity because it literally right now is the hottest day they have recorded, they think, or in Texas, or at least the hottest day since the 1950s. I think right now it's 111 degrees in parts of Texas. Very, very hot. 111 degrees Fahrenheit. I should know what that is Celsius, but I don't off the top of my head. The sequoias are burning down in the western part of the United States, and it's wildfire season, but the wildfires are moving in different ways. We just have climate change to contend with. We also have geopolitical tensions that are popping up. The current conflict, the war that Russia has waged on the Ukraine, has challenged the global supply chain for agricultural products, including fertilizer, stuff like that. Anyhow, my point is this: agriculture itself hasn't really evolved in roughly, 14,000 years. Not really. In a place like Brazil, where there are lots of abandoned mines, for example, there's an opportunity to rethink agriculture. So sugar cane is a crop that's grown there. It's very tall. Sugarcane's a crazy crop. It's huge. It's hard to cultivate. It's hard to harvest. It's like a big mess, but a lot of people depend on it. What if you edited that crop and made it so that it was more adaptable with less light, and maybe could produce a greater yield, maybe was shorter but more bushy, making it easier to harvest? Then maybe it's possible that the future of Brazil is cave-based agriculture, so that you've got, let's say, fiber optics filtering in light, or maybe use LED light, but you're able to grow those crops that were outside and dependent and, vulnerable to conditions that nobody can control. Now you've got a controllable environment, and it's inside of a structured area, you could introduce things like robots to help, pick and manage some of that crop. If Brazil decided to create a vision for the future, let's say 10 years from now, where they are the world leader in many agricultural products and processes, and work backwards from that, synthetic biology could be a game changer. It could revolutionize Brazil's economy. So I actually think there's a ton of opportunity all around the world to start thinking a little differently about some of its GDP, some of what it's currently doing, and whether or not synthetic biology might be an option. One other quick example, we do work in India, and India has some huge companies that produce really important products like tires, but which rely on, raw materials, which again are subject to the same issues, geopolitics, weather, all that other stuff. So if there's a way to create a new version of a product using, let's say, editing algae and re-engineering rubbers so that it can work alongside another material like that can break down, that starts to chip away at a pretty big problem. So there's a ton of options out there, I think.
Very interesting. Do you think, all this sounds really amazing, and from me being someone who comes from the global South, I definitely see these opportunities you're talking about, but can we be suffering here from some over-optimism?
Oh, yeah.
I know that in the short term, Amara's law, sometimes we tend to overestimate the impact of technology in the short term, underestimate its impact in the long term. Do you see something of that happening here? I also mention it because right now, for example, if we put the example of blockchain, we might see something similar occurring there. Is there some similarities with synthetic biology?
Yeah, well, here's what I would say. So far we've been talking about options. There's an entire part of this book that spells out catastrophic doom. There are lots of risks on the horizon. There are challenges with synthetic biology in different markets. So in the United States, process is not regulated. I mean, it is regulated, but mostly what the regulatory agencies are interested in is product. And that creates a bottleneck, right? We've talked about IP as a problem. There are all kinds of other problems. Biology tends to self-sustain, whether or not we want it to. Some of the people making decisions about this are pretty homogenous. They're located in just a few places, and maybe they're making decisions that don't make sense for everybody. This is something that can become weaponized. So there are all kinds of problems here. But as with everything, just because we can identify risks doesn't mean we don't pursue the best possible outcomes. We can identify risk now, so let's mitigate it and figure out a way to create a future where the best possible outcomes can come to fruition. Now, I will tell you, we're at the very early stages of this. So we're on a very, very, very long horizon cycle here, which again, to me, this is more analogous to AI than it is to blockchain. And the other reason why is this: everybody got so AI has been in some form of development, I would say, for the past 100 or more years. And we are now on sort of the third era of computing. The term artificial intelligence was coined in 1956 during a meeting at Dartmouth University. It was like this 2-month-long summer workshop kind of thing. The guys that were at that meeting came out. It was a cross-disciplinary group. They came up with all these crazy ideas. They get out of the meeting. They go on to pursue some of their projects. And they start telling people about what they're working on and making these crazy, bold promises. I mean, one of the researchers was, in the 1960s, talking about a future where, a computer will simultaneously translate any language into any language. Well, at that point, computers were literally the size of the room that I'm sitting in. The amount of compute necessary to do that in a reasonable amount of time did not exist. But they were so successful in hyping people up. They also became kind of like the talk of the town. People in Hollywood got excited. This was the beginning of movies. If anybody remembers HAL, the computer from Space Odyssey, like this is all happening around that time. And when the promises that they were making failed to materialize, investors got spooked, government funding dried up, and that was kind of it. It became the AI, what's known as the AI winter. So I do worry that we could be headed into a similar situation with biology. Now, the core differences are synthetic biology at this point is much more heavily regulated than AI was at this point in its own trajectory. So because of some of those regulations, we don't quite see the same Wild West, trying to do all of these different things. That's one thing. But on the other hand, there's a startup that called Altos Labs, which looks like it's going to be doing amazing things. They have the best talent out there, and they're making bold promises about effectively reversing the aging process, making it so we can live much longer. This is a company that the last time I looked had around a $4 billion valuation. Okay. So they don't have any products yet. They've got promises, not products, and they've got great people and everything else. But like, this is the kind of thing that starts to make me nervous, because I think this field is very, very important. We need to look at it critically. There are definitely risks associated. But if everybody starts getting the sense of FOMO, like we're seeing with metaverse and blockchains, and all the, people are throwing money at it, and these wild expectations, it's going to tank the field before it's ready. So what I would like to see happen is let all of these researchers and scientists just keep their heads down doing their work, but let's have thoughtful conversations about policy and societal implications around the same time as the whole thing evolves.
Yes, I agree, definitely. So since we're running out of time, I would like to touch maybe upon one last subject just very quickly. It's one thing you mentioned also at the end of your book, and it's the idea of reperception and how we need to reconceive our ideas about the future in order to help us imagine different possible futures. I mentioned at the beginning that you're a foresight practitioner. So what are your thoughts about that and like how it relates to synthetic biology?
You know, we all suffer from a couple of things. Right now, cognitive overload. There is so much change happening so quickly that it feels like we're being pelted and assaulted with new data points every single day. And our brains do not like that because it feels like we're just living through utter chaos. The sheer amount of deep uncertainty, the soul-crushing amount of deep uncertainty that we are all dealing with right now is making it really challenging for us to think about the future in a critical way, right? And even worse, we can't see ourselves in a future. And so when those conditions exist, a couple of things happen. One, we tend to really fall back on what feels comfortable already, which means that our cognitive biases tend to become exacerbated. The other thing that happens is we just we pay more and more attention to what's obvious. And sometimes what's obvious is obvious because of repetition, not because it's the correct thing to be paying attention to. So again, I go back to the metaverse because it's just pervasive. It's everywhere. You would think it is the future. The metaverse is a concept. It's nothing right now. It's a handful of people with ideas that came from a book that somebody wrote a while ago. So as that is all being sorted out, when you talk to people about the metaverse, we tend to gravitate toward the same things: NFTs, cartoon avatars, virtual reality, when that's actually not what's happening. The Web 3 and probably Web 4 or 5 after it, where we see the application layer of technologies, is the stuff that matters, the infrastructure. That would be the place to explore, but we get stuck because that is all very unfamiliar and challenging to think about. As all of this relates to synthetic biology, we've got some real personal mental hurdles we're going to have to get around. One is, this is a contradiction. It represents a contradiction. This is not God deciding life. This is not fate deciding life. We now have the ability to make decisions about the evolution of life, and that represents a contradiction as old as humans have been around. So that's going to be a struggle for a lot of people to think about. There are questions about who should have access to this. And again, that should force us into taking a broader look at what the options are. Basically, we're going to have to take the existing data points that we have and see them in a new light. That is the art of reperception. It's seeing the exact same information, but finding things in it that are less obvious, but no less important than the obvious stuff. And futurists, who do this professionally, we have frameworks and models and tools that we use. But if you're not a futurist, you can do this too. And it's a matter of intentionally looking for white spaces, right? Seeing new insights in what others are missing, and also stopping for a moment to say, if my initial reaction to this is no, or it's bad, let me balance that by saying, okay, well, what could I see here that's potentially not bad or not good? And then checking yourself over and over again, is my thinking on this right, or could I benefit from doing some more expansion? At the end of all of this is, if this happens, what's next? So getting into a mindset of not just reperception, but really rehearsing the future, thinking through those next order impacts, and then working back to the present. What is our best chance for a preferred plausible outcome for the best possible future? It's not going to show up fully formed. It's the result of decisions that each one of us make every single day.
Wow, and that's a great way to end our conversation. Very stimulating, Amy. Thank you again for your time. So the book is called The Genesis Machine. It is by Amy Webb. We'll be sharing a link to her website so that you can learn more about her work and get a copy of the book. Amy, it was a pleasure having you with us, and we hope to have you back sometime soon.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much. And to everybody out there, thanks for listening and thanks for reading.
Radio nos proponemos ser la emisora online calificada para ser la mejor opción en comunicación para usted. Nos preparamos en noticias, deportes, cultura, música y de entretenimiento general para que usted esté conectado todo el tiempo con nosotros. Caribe Radio ofrece el mejor servicio de comunicación digital para que las empresas se hagan visibles a diferentes públicos. Desde lo público trabajamos para el servicio y por el servicio social. Caribe Radio Online nos entrenamos día a día para brindar la mejor opción en producción de medios digitales. Caribe Radio, la radio del futuro.